So normally when I'm trying to decide what topic to make a video about, the process is usually pretty simple. I see a thing, I see that thing go boom, and now I must make a video on said thing because my audience, like me, also enjoys things that go boom. It's not complicated. The fact of the matter is the Army's track record of transforming current problems into future declassified bedtime stories is completely unmatched. And over the past few videos, the aforementioned stories have been painstakingly explored by some milk chocolate coated stud to include all-time fan favorites like the 36-inch Little David Mortar, the 240mm Black Dragon, and oh, who could forget the time the Army strapped nuclear warheads to rockets, gave them to standard issue troops, and everyone was just weirdly okay with it. Okay, maybe not everyone was okay with it, but perhaps they weren't given much of a choice. Who knows? The Army is a bunch of damn bullies, so it's entirely possible that when the Army has its sights set on your nice things, well, it's not going to be long before they come around like Debo to take what once was yours and will soon become currently theirs. What in the actual hell are you talking about? You make it sound like the Army managed to take something from the Air Force, which has never happened ever. That's adorable. You're cute. This is a public service announcement. Never underestimate the power of a disgruntled grunt with nothing to lose, the cover of darkness, and leadership who is willing to look the other way and or just isn't in the mood to do all the paperwork. Now the reason I'm telling you this is that more or less, that's how the conversation went down when the Army realized that the Air Force had nukes and they wanted in on that action. And truth be told, you can't even be mad at that. The Army saw what they wanted, tactically acquired it, and turned it into the Red Mist Passion project known as the 280mm M65 atomic cannon, better known as the Atomic Annie. Now Annie is best known for one legendary accomplishment, being the first and only artillery piece in the world to launch a tactical nuclear device.
Nice. Nice!
Okay, clearly the magnitude of what I just said isn't sinking in quite hard enough yet, so I'm gonna say that again, but this time much slower. America, actually nah, f that. Let's put some respect on it. The Army designed, built, tested, and fielded a motorized 280mm cannon, the largest the US has ever deployed, and it was capable of delivering the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT up to 20 miles away, and could do it more accurately and with less recoil than any other artillery piece before it.
Damn! I'm sorry.
This is certifiably insane, so how exactly did we get here? Because here's the thing, no one, not even the Army, just decides to wake up one day and choose this level of violence. So what's the deal? Well, it's kind of a funny story, and it all started with one terrible idea. And of course, like most terrible ideas tend to do, it all started with the Germans. Back in 1939, Hitler and his little boy band of sexually confused supervillains rolled out a new weapon system. A true monster of a railgun. You can read the name of it here. I don't speak Hitler, and last I checked, the winners get to choose the standard for worldwide currency and language. Therefore, I'm under no obligation at all to learn how to pronounce whatever the hell this is, so we're just gonna move on from there, and no one is gonna have a problem with that at all in the comment section. Hey man, it's pronounced, per my last email, no one is gonna have a problem with this. But anyway, putting aside my patriotic side quest, this railgun was actually insane by every conceivable metric. And in case you've been living under a rock, or maybe you just prefer not to hear the losers' versions of events, the TLDR is this. It could fire 10,000-pound shells over 30 miles away and had penetration capability that was measured in feet, not inches. Now listen, as a proud American male, I can truly appreciate how important deep penetration is to getting the job done.
That's what she said.
But someone must have forgotten to tell the Germans that having the right equipment ain't worth a velvet painting of a whale and a dolphin getting it on, if you can't even get said firepower to the fight. And at 1,490 tons, that's 2,980,000 pounds to my math illiterate friends out there, this weaponized compensation project was a shining example of everything wrong with any military whose flag doesn't ring true with the colors of red, white, and blue. Why are you so stupid? The German railgun had nothing to do with the creation of the Atomic Annie. The atomic cannon was developed in direct response to a potential Soviet invasion, you fudging dumb shit mother fudging fatherless clown show. Whoa, language. Then again, if I spent all my free time being salty in the YouTube comment section and still lost every argument, I'd start trying out baby's first cuss words as well. Now yes, while technically the German railgun didn't directly lead to the development of the Atomic Annie, that's not why I brought it up. No, I mentioned it because sometimes bigger isn't always the answer. And as anyone who lives their life a quarter mile at a time will tell you, it ain't always about raw power. It's about power to weight ratio. There's a reason why one of my most favorite cars of all time, the Ariel Atom, can beat the brakes off most supercars and even some sport bikes. Its downright anemic 300-ish horsepower would normally be nothing to write home about, but when you put it in a car that's lighter than 3 average-sized Kamala voters, well, the result that you get is a screaming cracked-out death cart that will literally rearrange your face. So with all that said, what do you think the power-to-weight ratio of the German railgun was?
Don't worry, I'll wait.
Now, if you're still sitting there struggling with the math, don't worry. Daddy Chocolate Thunder is here to help. All you have to do is solve for the kinetic energy of each HE shell, which gives us a TNT payload equivalent of 0.63 tons. Okay, alright, not bad. So all of that means that when we account for the railgun weighing in at 1,490 tons, we can conclude that it had a power-to-weight ratio of approximately 0.0004.
You serious?
I'm calling BS. I bet you didn't even use metric units. A real engineer would have known that, and I bet your GPS sucked ass. Hey, you know what? That's fair. I'll give you that. But you forgot 2 things. 1, remember the golden rule. The winners get to choose the unit of measurements. And 2, yeah, my GPA was trash. But you know what they call an engineer who barely graduated? An engineer. Oh, Jesus! Anyway, enough with the nerd talk. Let's talk about how we actually got the atomic ante. So once upon a time in a land full of communists and Cold War anxiety, the Soviets were thinking real long and hard about rolling tanks into Western Europe. America, not being a fan of that idea, said to themselves, nope, can't have that shit. And then they proceeded to look through its big old bag of long-range solutions and realize that something was missing. Sure, they had missiles and plenty of artillery, but missile technology was still unreliable and already didn't pack a big enough punch that they were looking for. So, the Army's brain trust got together. They broke out their best brown water and ever so thoughtfully and eloquently outlined their best and brightest ideas to pontificate over. Let's shoot a nuke out of a gun. Sir, you want a nuke out of a gun? Correction, a really big gun. Sir, with all due respect, I don't think that's a really good idea. Do it, or I'm transferring you to the Navy. And so with this newfound motivation, by the late 1940s, the Army had officially requested a mobile field gun capable of firing a tactical nuke. And the Air Force, predictably, threw a tantrum. Why do you need a weapon capable of wiping out an entire city? That is literally our thing. Outstanding point you make there, Reginald. The more the merrier, I say. And besides, we don't want to destroy cities. We just want to turn Soviet battalions into finely misted, coagulated confetti. Okay, Duke, but you don't need to do that. If you need bomb support, we can handle that. From the air. Dropping force. Air Force. You see how this works? It's literally in the name. So tell me, Reggie, how'd that Air Force work out for you at St. Lo and the Battle of the Bulge? Oh wait, I remember. You dropped bombs on us, and you also managed to airdrop our supplies to the enemy, so thanks for that. Duke, life be like that sometimes. It's the fog of war. Speaking of fog, you can't drop bombs in bad weather, can you? What's the matter? Can't see what you're aiming at? Or are you so worried about tracking mud back in your hotel room that you'll drop bombs tomorrow when it's 70 degrees and sunny? Duke, you know damn well terrain and weather are critical factors when putting bombs on target. Maybe if you got soft hands, then sure, it matters. Not to my guys. Rain or shine, the sociopaths I got on my team are gonna compete for the highest kill streak like they're playing a video game. You don't need a nuclear siege gun! Look, Reginald, this is getting nowhere fast, so how about this? Let's put it to a little test. Let me put pen to pad, we'll try and build our nuke gun, and if we succeed, well, we'll see how it would do in a force-on-force exercise. How's that sound? Sounds good, Duke. I'll see you out there. Sounds good, Reg. Got something for real. And so, despite the protests and whining, Congress relented and gave the Army the money they needed to build their new gun. And if we're being perfectly honest, nobody really believed the Army could actually pull this off. I mean, you gotta keep in mind what year it is, and nukes were kinda huge. For context, the Hiroshima bomb was so big that the B-29 that dropped it had to be specifically modified just to carry it. Now let's fast forward to early 1952, and America is conducting a giant fake war in Texas called Exercise Longhorn, where over 100,000 troops would fight it out in a mock war between the Soviets and the Americans. Enemy forces were preparing for an assault when suddenly a shell bursts overhead, releasing some harmless white smoke, and everyone just kinda looked at it and shrugged, and just carried on business as usual. Then the formation, hyped up, ready for action, ready for the literal bloodbath they were about to unleash on the unsuspecting American forces, then proceeds to go out and— Sir, you're dead. Wait, what? Lay down, sir. You're dead. What is happening right now? What are you talking about? Sir, you and 1,600 of these men are out of action due to that airburst atomic artillery shell that just blew up overhead. Nobody could believe what just happened. In order for the Army to pull this off, they had to not only make a shell over 10 times smaller than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, but they also had to design a weapon system capable of firing it from scratch. And they somehow had to have pulled this off in only 2 years. This has to be a mistake. There is no possible way that they managed to make an atomic cannon in only 2 years. Okay, it's done. What do you mean it's done? What can I say? Motivation is a hell of a drug. The faster the troops can get more killing done, then the sooner they can go back to doing nothing. And with that bombshell literally dropped, the Army officially unveiled their newest toy. On September 29, 1952, a 280mm gun dubbed the T-131 was rubbed in the faces of the Air Force leadership, and furthermore, approximately 8 months later, they would finally get to show off this new atomic round that they had developed. But figuring out a way to beat the laws of physics in this mission was only half the battle. They also had to build a gun capable of delivering those long-range angry atoms. So the Army called up Picatinny Arsenal, and their staff of mad geniuses managed to pull off what can only be described as metal sorcery. What they managed to build was one of the most insane pieces of eradication engineering ever built. It's absolutely ridiculous how well this thing was built, to which you are now wondering yourself, well, how well built was it? Well, this thing was so well built that when fired, the over 4 million pounds of recoil generated could be absorbed without having to dig the gun in. 4 million pounds of recoil just gone, erased, completely soaked up. Am I supposed to be impressed? Because I'm not. Look, guy, I know your parents failed you as an adult, so allow me to finish the job that they never did by introducing you to a concept that you may not be familiar with. Are you sitting? Are you ready for it? 2 little words to add to your vocabulary. You're wrong.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
And here's why you're wrong. An M777, which shoots a 155 round, weighs about 4.6 tons, give or take how spicy the crew wants to make the recipe for that day. The Atomic Annie, on the other hand, weighs 86 tons and shoots around the equivalent of 35,000 155 rounds going off at the exact same time. Now, I'm no rocket surgeon, but even I have enough fingers and toes to figure out that when a gun is 35,000 times more powerful than another, but doesn't weigh or recoil 35,000 times more, well, that by definition makes it an engineering marvel. In fact, while we're on the subject of recoil, remember that 4 million pounds of recoil generated when fired? Well, due to its clever double recoil system, it reduced this recoil down to a mere 100,000 pounds. That's a 97.5% reduction from its starting point. Impressive doesn't even begin to come close to describing how insane this was. It was just straight up black magic ballistics. Now don't go thinking this girl was all show and no go, because Annie wasn't just powerful, she was also mobile and flexible. Because another feature of the Atomic Annie was its ability to fire in any direction. Again, what's the big deal? All guns can do that. Just pick it up and move it. Fact check false. You're not moving a dug-in gun with any sort of speed. A big artillery piece is kind of like a liberal snowflake. Once they're in position, you're gonna have a hell of a time getting them to move.
He needs some milk.
Okay, bad analogy, but you get my point. Anyway, the Atomic Annie was easy to move because the main assembly was perfectly balanced around what was essentially a giant steel ball bearing. And when I say perfectly balanced, I mean that only 4 guys, I say again, only 4 guys could rotate the Annie a full 360 degrees in any direction by hand. Hell, in order to elevate the barrel, which by itself was 43 feet long and weighed like, I don't know, several tons. I don't know how much it weighed. Let's call it a shit ton. That's close enough. Anyway, in order to raise and lower this thing, this 43 foot long shit ton heavy barrel, it only required turning the wheel with only 30 pounds of pressure. 30 pounds. 30 pounds is low-key insane. It's gonna take you more force to knock down a couple of soy-drinking Antifa libtards than it's gonna take you to position this gun into place in order to delete an entire grid square. Now, speaking of getting this gun into position, the one thing the Army didn't invent, well, so far as they're telling us, is teleportation. And since that doesn't exist, that meant that getting the Atomic Annie into position required a set of wheels. And I do literally mean a set, because it took 2 trucks to do so. Now normally when we need to move big military equipment around, you need to break it into pieces, spread the love across multiple transporters, and you just hope and pray that none of those trucks break down along the way. But for whatever reason, it was determined that the best course of action was to literally sandwich the gun between 2 trucks and drive them both at the same time. These were two completely separate trucks with two sets of drivers that could move independently of each other. These legends of the E4 Mafia would coordinate with each other via telephone and do their best to swing this big body around the mean streets without hopefully hitting anything. The front truck, called the M249, would control the throttle and brakes, while the rear truck, known as the M250, well, he would do his best to try not to take chunks out of homes in those turns, which did happen from time to time. Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't happen even more, because when you consider the entire rolling assembly was 84 feet long, clearly the room for error was small. And as one team of Annie drivers put it, quote, "In our line of work, the inches are important."
That's what she said. Excuse me? That's what she said.
You know, you gotta love the Army and their habit of letting privates speak unsupervised to reporters. Anyway, I digress, because the last thing the crew of this beast would have to do prior to firing was to find the target and decide it in. Which was no small feat, considering that targets could be between 18 and 20 miles away, which meant that eyeballing it and firing was a no-go. At that distance, it required an entire platoon of highly trained artillerymen, intel support, and recon patrols to get the numbers dialed in. But the result of all this meant that the Annie had damn near pinpoint accuracy, up to 4 times better than any mobile gun of its era. But all that said, ultimately the aim for all this insane engineering was meant to do one thing and one thing only.
Killing Nazis.
Nope, different enemy, same vibe. No, this was about sending a message to the Soviet Union that if they thought about getting a little froggy with us, well, we had an answer waiting for them and they were ready to tag in. And that answer came on May 25th, 1953. At 0830, the world witnessed history. A 600-pound Mark 9 atomic shell was launched, flew 7 miles over the course of 19 seconds, and detonated 524 feet above its target with a 15-kiloton explosion. Now, a lucky few got to witness this history in the making with their own 2 eyes, but fortunately for you and me, they recorded the entire thing. Take a look.
God's lessons are so beautiful. God's lessons are beautiful? I'm sorry, who put this fight together?
Now, I don't want to just gloss over this, let's just live here for a moment, shall we? Because what you just witnessed was proof that the Army found a way to miniaturize a 9,700-pound nuclear bomb to a 600-pound form factor, launch it out of a custom-built siege gun with virtually no recoil, and it delivered the equivalent of 15,000 tons, not pounds, 15,000 tons of TNT 7 miles away. And they did all of this over-the-top extra nonsense in less than 2 years. 2 years. 2 years. You know what took more time to develop than a whole 86-ton nuclear firecracker? The Cybertruck. It took more time to get the Cybertruck in the hands of rich white girls everywhere than it did to build the Mike's Red Hot of field artillery. That being said, let's be real for a second. No one really understands how powerful TNT is. Hell, I'm an Army engineer, and most of the time all we ever use is C4. So how about this for some perspective? That shot that you just witnessed was the equivalent of 15,000 JDAMs, 1,364 Moabs, or just enough for Master Chief to take out the Covenant. Look, all I'm saying is that shot was epic, and to say that that test was a massive success would be a serious understatement. So much so that the cannon that did the firing, known as Able Annie, was shortly thereafter rechristened to Atomic Annie. And the Army was so hyped up about their new ground transportable weapon dispenser that they called up their guy and ordered 20 of them.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Well, not so fast. What we have to keep in mind is that with great power
Comes great responsibility.
You forgot weight again, Uncle Ben. We literally went over this in the Black Dragon video. With great power comes great responsibility and weight. Guys, there's no other way to be nice about this, but the Atomic Annie, well, she was a big old girl. At 86 tons, she was thick, with 2 C's.
Girl, you're thicker than a bowl of oatmeal.
Now, while I personally prefer a little extra meat on the bone, in this case, there weren't enough airline seat extensions in the world that could make the Atomic Annie make sense. At a weight of somewhere between 86 and 88 tons, only the best roads can handle its immense weight. And when you combine this insane weight with long-range missile technology finally becoming a viable option, well, this spelled the beginning of the end for the Atomic Annie. Or maybe that was Sad Sack. I forget. I get the two mixed up. Which apparently is pretty easy to do because it took the Army a whole 10 years for anyone to realize that they had misplaced the real Atomic Annie.
What? Awkward.
Yeah, I agree. See, what had happened was, during the 10-year anniversary commemorating the firing of the Atomic Annie, someone realized that the serial number on the gun that they had at Fort Sill didn't match the real Atomic Annie. The gun they had presently in front of them matched a gun named Sad Sack. Afterwards, a worldwide search was conducted until the real Atomic Annie was eventually found on active duty in Germany, and then not long after that she was sent back stateside where she still resides to this day at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. You know, you've got to hand it to the Army and their petty tendencies. They saw a toy that they wanted, they made their own version of it, and they didn't care who they pissed off in the process. This really isn't much different than what they did with their nuclear missile program, which is a video I highly recommend you check out next. Speaking of videos, y'all better let me know what videos you certified degenerates demand of me next. Y'all take it easy, CT6